Hey YouTube, Ed here with Jack of All Trades. Welcome to another video and thanks for joining along. So today what we're doing is we're doing something that I'm kind of excited about. We are going to test and review the Yes Welder Cut 55 DS plasma cutter. Now I've wanted a plasma cutter for quite a while and I've been shopping around, and full disclosure, Yes Welder actually contacted me and asked me to do a review on this, and they sent me this machine free of charge. Now, don't let that think you're not going to get an honest review here, because you are. I've got no allegiance to Yes Welder. Uh, if I think it's a good machine, I'm going to tell you it's a good machine. If I think it's a piece of junk, I'm going to say it's a piece of junk. And I'm going to tell you anything in between. My likes, my dislikes, how well it cuts. And I'm just using your garden variety homeowner air compressor here. So we're going to see how well it functions with an air compressor that is not a high capacity, fast recovery machine. I've got some material all the way from 14 gauge all the way up to ½ inch. I've got the capability of running it on 110 and 220 volts, so we're going to try it under both voltage settings because this is a dual voltage machine, and we're just going to see how it performs, and I'm going to give you my general impression of the machine overall. Now, this machine sells on the Yes Welder website for, I believe, under $500. If last time I checked, I want to say it was in that $450 range. So this is a very economical option if you are needing a plasma cutter. I do know the VersaCut, the Eastwood VersaCut, sells for right around that $750 range, and I believe Harbor Freight is selling the titanium 45 amp plasma cutter for somewhere in the vicinity of about $900 to $1,000. They're not giving it away. Now, I've not used either one of those machines. I don't know how they perform, but that is a price comparison for machines in the similar amperage range. This is a 55 amp machine. The VersaCut 60 is a 60 amp machine, and the titanium 45 amp they're all right in that same amperage range. I do know that the VersaCut is 220 only. You can't plug that into 110. The titanium machine is capable of handling 110 and 220. So we'll see how this one performs, and I'll give you my opinion on it. So let's get the camera relocated. Let's turn around. I'll get my cup of coffee out of the way, and let's have a look at this machine. Okay, so you all know me, and you all know that I hate unboxing. So this thing is obviously out of the box, and it's already assembled, and it's ready to go and use. And on all honesty, I've already used it a little bit. But for the purposes of this video, I'm still going to go over the fit and finish and what I feel this machine is like. Overall first impression, fit and finish of the machine looks like it's pretty well built. Just first impressions, first looking at it, the paint is, or the finish on it, whether it be paint or powder coated, I'm not sure what it is. It's nice. There's no imperfections in it. It's very well done, and everything looks like it was made within the normal industry standards of what you would expect on a machine in this price range. Some things about it: this handle is metal, but it's got plastic attachments to the cover. I'm not a big fan of plastic, but that's kind of seems to be the way things are leading these days. The front cover is also plastic. Really not a fan of this clear plastic shield on here. I mean, we're working in a metal environment here. I can't imagine that this plastic shield is going to last very long. It's not even very well attached. I don't know, it just, if it does what it's supposed to do, which is to keep most of the sparks off of the indicators and the gauges, fine, so be it. I just can't imagine that lasting very long. There is a gauge on the front of this machine, but this gauge actually is what it tells you is it tells you your working pressure. When you plug the air compressor into this machine, it's not going to deflect. It's going to read 0, and the only time it's going to start reading is when you do what they call an air check, or you pull the trigger on the gun, and then it's going to deflect, and it's going to tell you what your working pressure is on the gauge. This knob here adjusts for your amperage. It goes up to 55 amps. On the front here we have all the various connections that you need to put the lead and the ground connector on. Not a huge fan of the way these wires just kind of lay loose here, but you know what? We are talking about a $450 machine. I do like the fact that this strain relief here is hex shaped, so you don't really need to have tools to connect the air line to the machine. You can do it by hand. That's kind of a nice feature. Right here you have your control wire. Interesting thing, you can see right here, you can see that the wires on the control wire, it looks like they just pushed some wire in there to fill it up. I don't know, that kind of seems like a little bit of chintzy engineering to me, because this plug here has got a clamp on it, you know, like a Romex connector for your electrical, and it looks like the clamp was a little too big for the diameter of the wire, so they just crammed some wire in there to fill it up. I'm not real big on that. Build it up another way to make it look a little nicer. That just seems to me like a cheap and easy way out, but it is effective. It did work, and the wire doesn't seem like it's in any danger of pulling out. The connection here for the arc start is it's just your basic ring terminal crimp-on connection. There's nothing special about that there. But overall, it's your basic connections for everything else. The ground clamp, it's like any other machine that I've had to deal with. You put the ground clamp in, you give it a half a turn, and it's locked in. And it's nice and positive, and everything feels good. There's no problems there. When I did get this machine, I did notice that on this side of the machine, this top louver had a wire sticking out of it, and it was there's just some wiring right in here, and it's just when they put the cover on it, it worked its way down in there. It wasn't a big deal. A little quality control could have probably taken care of that if they'd have looked at it before they shipped it out. A little bit about the gun and the lead itself. I like the feel of the gun. The gun, it's nice and healthy. I got big hands, and this really fills my hand nicely. Ergonomically, it feels really good. This little rubber red decorative thing on here, you know, you're going to have gloves on anyway. It looks nice. It doesn't look like it's in any danger of falling off. This little safety catch they have right here, that's not going to last very long. This is just so you don't inadvertently pull a trigger. That's really light duty. That's just simply not going to last long. I fully expect that to not last more than, without using extreme caution, I don't expect that to last long at all. But it is there. They do have a safety on there. It's nice and big. You can get it out of the way even with gloved hands, and you can reach your trigger. The gun itself, you know, the cup and the tips and the diffuser on it, the air diffuser on it, they are proprietary to Yes Welder. I asked Yes Welder, you have to buy it right from Yes Welder, which is fine. They're not expensive. The consumables are not expensive at all. But to my knowledge so far, and I have not looked or tried, it looks like you probably have to get your consumables from Yes Welder at this point. Maybe somebody will eventually come out in Amazon in the aftermarket industry and start providing the consumables for this. But for right now, that's my understanding of it. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you know differently, please let me know in the comments. Again, we have a strain relief right here. It's kind of nice that strain relief is rotating. So as you rotate the gun, the strain relief is rotating. So it shouldn't bind up. It shouldn't twist. And the gun should not have any real problems with the lead twisting. The cover on this is a rubber cover or a vinyl style cover, and as you can see, I've already burned through it here once. That was kind of my fault, but this cover is really not going to protect much. If I keep this machine, I will probably go to my local welding supply, and I will probably get a more flame resistant or heat resistant cover, because this rubber vinyl cover just really isn't protecting a whole lot. At the same time, you buy any other machine of this caliber, it's got the same kind of vinyl cover on it. So just be advised of that. I think what I will do is I will go get a leather lead cover for like a MIG gun, and I will probably wrap this up, like I said, if I keep the machine. But overall, I think the quality of the gun and the lead is about what you would expect for a plasma cutter in this price range. So here's an interesting thing. This plug off the welder is wired for a 110 receptacle, i.e. you can plug this into a 110 outlet and it will work on 110. And this machine is actually smart enough to know the difference, and you don't have to flip any switches or anything like that. It just automatically knows. Now, I did see on the plug here, it does say you must reset the welder for 2 minutes when switching from 110 to 220, i.e. you have to shut the machine off and unplug it and let it sit for 2 minutes, I suppose, so it forgets that it was working on 110 or 220, and then plug it into the other voltage that you're going to use. What's interesting to me is the fact that this plug is a 110 plug, and this is the one going directly into the machine. Every other dual voltage machine I have ever seen has got this plug going into the machine as a 220 plug. And here's why it's curious to me. The adapter that they give you, you have your 220 on this end, and you have a 110 receptacle on this end. And I have plugged my voltmeter into this, and I will show you the video for it right now. So you can see there that when you plug this into your 220, you're getting 220 volts to this style plug. You can plug any 110 appliance into this plug. This is the plug for my shop vac. This is the adapter for the Yes Welder. It fits right in there. Feasibly, I could be applying 220 volts to any 110 appliance. Do not be of the impression that this plug, when you plug it into 220, is necking this voltage down to 110, because it's not. It's providing 220 volts, and I just proved it to you with my meter. I am not a fan of that. I am not a fan of that at all. And I'm only not a fan of that because somebody who doesn't know, or somebody who's not watching this video, may get this machine and go, hey, look at there, I got a cool adapter. I can plug this into my 220 and I can get another 110 outlet. I don't know why you would want to do that, but I guarantee you somebody will try it. So I'm here to tell you, this does not turn 220 into 110. It actually turns 220 into 220 that plugs into a 110 outlet. Not a fan of that. That I am not impressed with. I would much rather see Yes Welder put that plug on this cord right there, and then provide you with a 110 plug that fits a 220 socket, much like my titanium welder does. In fact, what I might do, again, if I keep this, is I will probably convert this plug to this, go to the hardware store, go to my local home center and get the correct plug, and then just use the adapter for my titanium to get it to 110, because that, I don't like this setup at all. Not impressed with that. That's not good engineering on Yes Welder's part. So be advised of that right away. Ground clamp. Garden variety ground clamp, exactly what I would have expected. It's actually a little better quality than what I would have expected for a ground clamp of this price range. It's nice that they do put the ground tie between the top and the bottom jaws, so you're not arcing through here. Through the hinge. That's a nice touch, and I'm glad they did that. This is actually a pretty decent ground clamp. Perfectly fine for a 55 amp machine. See no problems. It's just like any other ground clamp that you get, with the exception of from some of the really high dollar ones. They give you a much better ground clamp. Instructions. Again, not real impressed with Yes Welder's performance on their instruction book. Their instruction book is vague at best. There are no usable settings as far as metal thickness and amperage. It's going to be completely trial by error on your part. And the instructions on how to put this machine together are not great. They're there, and they would be what I would call barely adequate. They do give you some really good instructions on how to put the gun together with pictures and everything, and that's all well and good. But anything else in this instruction booklet, I'm not real happy with. But I'm mechanical. I understand how these things work. For me, it wasn't a really big deal. and there are plenty of YouTube videos out there on how to put this machine together and how to set it up. I am not going to do that for you today because I am not an individual who likes to recreate the wheel. There's other guys out there that have already done it. They're perfectly good videos. In fact, they're very good videos. I'll put a couple of links in the description if you want to see how to set this thing up. Not a great instruction manual, so Yes Welder really needs to up their game as far as the instruction manual is concerned. I have scoured this thing from cover to cover trying to find out some information, and it just simply wasn't in there, and I ended up contacting Yes Welder to provide me the information, one of which was the gauge that I was talking about and what the gauge settings should be and why my front panel gauge isn't reading. And that's when I found out that the only time that it reads on this particular machine that I've got is when you are doing an air check or squeezing the trigger. That being said, let's take a look at the gauge and the regulator on the back of the machine. So here's the back of the machine, and aside from the fact that you have your power connection here, which is exactly to be expected. Let me get that out of the way so you can see it a little better. They do provide you with a regulator, and they will provide you with a whole bunch of this clear vinyl tubing. Make sure you keep that clear vinyl tubing. Again, not real impressed with this. I would much rather see them put the air check or the air inlet in such a way that you could hook it directly to the gauge and get rid of this tubing altogether. I've already had to replace this once because I had a spark burn through it. That being said, that was a one-off, and I don't know. I'm just not a real big fan of this clear plastic tubing hanging off here. I've actually tried to cut it just short enough to go right in here, and it puts a lot of strain on this push-in fitting that they give you, and it actually started leaking, so I had to put in a loop here to kind of take some strain off of it so that it wasn't pushing up or down on it. So you kind of need to put this little loop in here to make it work well, and as a result it kind of hangs out here in the wind, and unless you got this thing on a cart or in a place that's not going to get moved around, this is a great thing that's going to get snagged up. The other thing about this regulator, I noticed on previous YouTube videos that the power cord used to be located down here, which got in the way of your regulator dryer. And as you can see, that's no longer an issue because Yes Welder has gone ahead and they've relocated the power cord up here, which was a great idea, and I'm glad they did it. I'm very, very glad they did that because people were bending this tab and doing some funky things to get this thing to mount. So they did make an improvement, and they did listen to everybody, and that it was a problem to have the power cord down here. What they don't give you with this regulator dryer is they do not give you a gauge. I actually added this gauge after the fact. I went to my local hardware store and I bought a gauge and I screwed it in here because I didn't know what the working pressure was that was coming into my machine, because the gauge on the front of the machine doesn't read unless you're pulling the trigger. So I wanted to know how much pressure I was applying to the system here, as well as know what my working pressure was on the front of the machine. Now, some of the older machines, and you're going to notice some of the other YouTubers out there, when they plug their regulator in, the gauge on the front of the machine automatically starts to read. This machine I've got doesn't do that. I think they've made some upgrades, and I think they've made some improvements, and that being the case, it's changed. So I did buy a gauge. I also bought a male fitting so I can plug this right into my air compressor hose. This is your standard garden variety regulator adjuster. You just lift it up, you can screw it in, you can screw it out, and your gauge will read, and you have your power on and off switch here, and you have your cooling fan here. So let's take it over to the shop and let's set up some steel and let's see how this thing cuts. So here we're out in the other garage. I'm hooked up to 110 here and we're cutting some 14 gauge. Starts really nice. And as you can see, it cuts right through it. Pretty good speed. No problems at all. There you saw me pierce through the 14 gauge. Just doing a little galaxy swirl here. It had no problem piercing 14 gauge material. There's another pierce, just pierces right through it. And if you can pierce the material, that's really a good true test. Here's just a little bit of fun. I'm going to write my name. You can see I can move along pretty good on 110 14 gauge. It moves along pretty well. I'm fairly impressed at the speed that I can run this. Now we bumped it up to a piece of 1/8 inch. Got to slow down just a little bit, but again, 1/8 inch doesn't stand much of a chance, even on 110 volts. Cuts through pretty nice, makes a pretty clean cut on the back side. There I went a little too fast and it didn't quite cut clean. That was my fault, so let's try it again. Slow it down a little bit and give the plasma cutter a chance. And there you go, 110 volt, it cuts it off pretty clean. Very impressed with how well this cuts on 110 volts. Again, it pierces just fine. No problem piercing 1/8 inch material on 110. And we'll just cut it off here. So 1/8 inch material is not a problem. Now we bumped it up to a piece of rusty old 3/16. And again, it's cutting through it just fine. I had to slow down again, but that's again to be expected. Cuts right through 3/16. Very nice clean cut. Little bit of slag on the back side. Here we're going to pierce. Little bit of sparks at the top side, but it does pierce it. Another pierce. 3/16 doesn't really seem to be a problem on 110 volts. Well, let's just cut it off to clean off the edge. Cuts it clean off. Very nicely done. Now we're up to a piece of 1/4 inch here. I wasn't sure if this was going to work, but son of a gun, if even on 110 volts, it doesn't cut that 1/4 inch material right off. Fairly impressive. Now what I did notice here was the weak link in this whole system was my air compressor. I'm going to have to upgrade my air compressor. I'm only 15 gallons. I don't have a fast recovery, but you can see 1/4 inch material, it cuts it just fine, even on 110 volts. We're starting to reach the limits of the capacity, and you can see there it even pierced 1/4 inch on 110. Here, I'll do it again. Got a little bit of sparks for my effort there in my face, but it does pierce 1/4 inch. Cut it off one more time just to show you the last cut. Quarter inch material, it will cut it. So now I'm up to a piece of 1/2 inch, and this is really where it starts to struggle. 1/2 inch is well over the capacity limitations of this machine when it's plugged into a 110 volt outlet. It's just not enough voltage to get the job done. I mean, you can get it done, but it's a struggle. It's just really not designed to do 1/2 inch material with 110 volts. In a pinch, if you had to, it would cut it. Now, what it did do was it kicked out my circuit breaker because I'm trying to cut that heavy duty material and my air compressor's running. It's too much for the 110 circuit to handle. And I got a 20 amp circuit in my garage, and it's just too much. So it did pop the circuit breaker on me once. So now I'm plugged into 220, and holy mackerel, 220 is night and day difference in the cutability. This is 1/8 inch material. It flies through 1/8 inch when you're plugged into 220. It's really impressive how quick it cuts. There's a pierce, not a problem at all. 220 is a noticeable difference on this machine. If you have the ability and you can use 220, it cuts way better on 220, but it will do 110. One more nice straight cut just to show you 1/8 inch material. There it is. So now we're bumping up to that same rusty piece of 3/16. Noticeably quicker, cutting through the 3/16, and it lops it right off. 220 is by far and away much more effective. Just cuts right through it. Here's a pierce. Oh, no, that wasn't a pierce, my bad. Just one more cut. Here's a pierce. A little bit of blowout, but it pierces right through 3/16. Doesn't seem to really have a problem with it. We'll cut it off just to clean it up. Final cut on the 3/16. And as you can see, 3/16 doesn't really stand a chance on 220. It does very, very well. Now we're up to that same piece of 1/4 inch. Once again, 1/4 inch cuts it just fine. You can see I got a nice heavy plasma stream underneath the material. Had to slow down, but every time you go up thicker, you just have to slow your rate down. Cuts through it just fine. It's not a problem. Here's a pierce. Even pierces 1/4 inch. Fairly impressive. Again, this is where I really noticed that my air compressor is the weak link in the system. I definitely need to upgrade my air compressor with a little higher capacity and a little faster recovery rate. I clipped out a lot of standing around waiting for the air compressor to catch up. Now here's that piece of 1/2 inch. Lo and behold, it's cutting 1/2 inch very, very well on 220. This is where it really was noticeable, the difference between 110 and 220. It really cut 1/2 inch pretty well on the 220 setting. And it really just cut it right off. Really nice and clean. A little bit of slag on the backside. Now I'm maxed out at 55 amps. And I've got 60 PSI of air coming through it. Still playing with it a little bit, but 1/2 inch doesn't seem to be a whole lot of problem. As long as you're patient and you slow your rate down, it should cut right through it. Now you're wondering why I'm curving off, and it's because I can only get so far before my air compressor kicks in, and as soon as the compressor kicks in, I lose some cutting ability, and it really hinders the ability for it to cut, which is why I say the weak link in the system is my air compressor. But it does cut 1/2 inch just fine. It's not really a problem. The other upside of that using the 220 was I wasn't popping my 110 circuit breaker as soon as the air compressor kicked on. So we're going to try piercing 1/2 inch here in a little bit. We're going to do one more cut starting from the edge. But I do try a pierce on the 1/2 inch material to see if it'll actually do it. See, I have a nice heavy plasma stream on the bottom side. Cuts the 1/2 inch off nice and clean. Now we'll try a pierce. And it actually pierces 1/2 inch material. Doesn't really like it. There's a little bit of spark blowback, but it will pierce 1/2 inch material. I would highly recommend you wear a face shield if you're going to be piercing 1/2 inch. Actually, if you're going to be piercing anything, I recommend a face shield because you will get some sparks blown back in your face for your effort. And that's just a result of the plasma cutter. You'll even get that with an acetylene torch.
So there you go. We've gone from 14 gauge all the way up to 1/2 inch, and the machine cut all of it. Grant you on 110, 1/2 inch was beyond its limitations. It would not cut 1/2 inch on 110, but to be honest with you, I wasn't really expecting it to. 110 volts just is not enough to push the amperage that you need to do something like that. However, in 220, it seemed to cut 1/2 inch pretty good. And in reality, how many times are you or I or any DIYer going to need to cut 1/2 inch? Really, plasma cutters shine in that sheet metal category through 3/16 and even 1/4 inch material. And if you need to cut anything heavier than that, this plasma cutter might not be exactly what you want, but it will take 1/2 inch as long as you're set up in 220. The things I don't like about it, I don't like this plastic hose on the back. I don't like the fact that I don't get a regulator with the filter dryer, and I don't like the fact that the front gauge only reads working pressure. Not a big fan of this plastic cover, and the casing on the outside of the stinger and the lead is a little bit chintzy and suspect, and certainly isn't going to protect much. It's going to be on us to put some kind of a fire-resistant protective covering on it. The instruction manual, pretty much useless, and it's outdated. There's no tables in here for material thickness, amperage settings, air settings. There's very little information in here. Even the setup instructions are not real good in it. So if you buy this machine, be prepared to do some research on YouTube, watch some YouTube videos to learn how to set it up and put it together. But it's really not that difficult. Really, at the end of the day, I put this whole thing together and I didn't open the instruction booklet until I just decided I was going to look and see what was in here. Really don't like this 110-220 adapter plug. I'm seriously not a fan of this. This is just a dangerous operation because some knucklehead out there will try to plug a 110 appliance into a 220, and it'll be a shocking experience, if I may have that pun. Things that I like. The machine is lightweight, doesn't weigh anything. I mean, it's a one-hand lift. It's really fairly light, very lightweight. It looks like it's very well quality built. I actually took the cover off. The components look like they're well seated. They all look like they've got the shmoo on it that keeps them from wiggling around and working around in there. So it should hold up fairly well. The fit and finish of the machine is nice. I like the way the gun feels in my hand. However, I don't like the little safety trigger that they give you here. I think that's kind of chintzy, but that's a minor thing. I like the fact that you get a pack of consumables with it, so you are right out of the box, out the door, and you're cutting. And I like the fact that it just flat cuts. I mean, it does very well. It's a no-nonsense machine, and it will cut up to 1/2 inch. I would even venture to say if I had some 5/8 laying around here, it would probably cut 5/8 if you're patient enough. End of the day, would I buy this machine? Yeah, I think I would. For a DIYer or even a light job shop or an auto body shop setting, I think this would be a good machine. For $500, under $500, I don't see any reason why not. I certainly don't see a need to spend any more than that for what I am going to use it for. Now, is it going to last? That's the big question. I've literally had this thing like 3 weeks. I've done some playing around with it. I haven't had any problems with it yet. 6 months down the road, am I going to feel the same way? Time will tell. And I will certainly do a 6-month down the road review on this thing to see how it's holding up. And if I keep it that long, maybe even a year. We'll see how the longevity holds up. One more thing I'd like to discuss with you, and I'm not really a big fan of it, but it did work in the end. I did have questions for Yes Welder, and so I called the 1-800 number listed in the manual, and that individual quite obviously wasn't a tech support agent. He was a customer service agent, and he referred me to tech support. Tech support is done primarily by email, and that is obviously done overseas. And it took a pretty solid day to get answers. Now, I will grant you, I always got an answer back. We worked back and forth. It took 2-3 emails to get all the questions answered and everything addressed, but I always got an answer back, and they were very, very good about always answering the emails, but they're about a day behind. So you send an email on Monday, you're not going to get an answer till Tuesday. You reply to that email on Tuesday, you're going to get an answer on Wednesday, and they're always about a day behind. So just understand that. If you're expecting immediate tech support, it's not going to happen here. It's done via email, it's not done via phone, and it's going to take about 24 hours for you to get a reply. So full disclosure, it works, it's just not the speediest process in the world. And I did get my questions answered, and we did get everything resolved, and the machine is working as it should. So with all that being said, I hope this video was helpful for you. I do have a discount code, which I will put in the description down below from Yes Welder if you decide you want to order this machine or any other Yes Welder products. They did give me a discount code for the people watching this video that if you want to order it, you get a little bit knocked off the price. And Yes Welder is always running things like free shipping and things like that, so just watch their website and you'll be able to find it. I hope this video was helpful for you. I hope it was informational for you. If you like the content, please hit that like and subscribe button. Make sure you ding that notification bell so that you don't miss any upcoming videos. Like I said, I'm probably going to have to upgrade my air compressor now. There's more content, so hopefully we'll get that done in the not so distant future. And with that, this is Ed with Jack of All Trades. Thank you for riding along. Thank you for watching, and we will see you on the next video.